Buckeye fans, we are live from day 2 of media activity here at the National Championship down in Atlanta, Georgia. We're just over 24 hours away, and today we go behind enemy lines with my good friend Kyle Kelly from On3's Blue and Gold Network, previewing the National Championship game between the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. That's coming to you next on the Buckeye Breakdown Podcast.
We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State
with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today.
Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.
Buckeye fans, welcome in to another episode of the Buckeye Breakdown Podcast. Anthony Moeglin here, along with a new face, fresh face, my partner, Kyle Kelly today, a former John Carroll Blue Streak, along with me way back in the day. But Kyle covers Notre Dame Fighting Irish for On3. And today we're going behind enemy lines. We've had a lot of the conversations. You know a lot of the storylines, and you've got them all from the Ohio State perspective, from my point of view. So we're going to bring in Kyle here to talk about it from Notre Dame side of things. So, Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. I know this website is scattered with blue streaks in the YouTube channel, so it's only fitting that I'm one of the blue streaks down here. So I appreciate you having me on the show. Excited to talk some Notre Dame, Ohio State. It's going to be a pretty exciting game. It's going to be a third game between these two teams in terms of Ryan Day, Marcus Freeman. A lot of storylines that have been talked about here throughout the week, and it's going to be an exciting game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium Monday.
It's pretty crazy. You talk about the past, right? You go back 2 years, the game that was in Columbus where Ohio State with C.J. Stroud playing quarterback. It's amazing to think, like, he just played yesterday in his second NFL playoff game for the Houston Texans. You have to think back a long ways to a game where Notre Dame probably felt like they'd be in it, or they felt like they were in it. Probably feels like they gave one away. And then you go back to last year where they certainly feel like they gave one away with that final run, that final drive, if you will. There's 3 or 4 plays that Notre Dame could have made on that final drive to win the football game. But Ohio State comes out on top with a Chip Trayanum handoff from Kyle McCord that both of those guys aren't even on the Ohio State roster at this point. But, Kyle, one of the big things, big general storylines from at least the media day we had yesterday, the coaches' press conferences we had this morning, is that these two teams have unbelievable respect for each other. The two coaches feels like they genuinely appreciate each other, respect each other, and comments from the team, from both teams, from players on all sides, feels like that these two teams, there's crazy hate between each other. They actually genuinely respect both programs.
Well, I'm glad you're not the only one to realize that, because I just finished up writing a 5 takeaways story that's up on On3.com right now from Marcus Freeman and Ryan Day's news conference. And I led off that story about talking about how there was a question asked by one of my colleagues, Tyler Horka, to Marcus Freeman and Ryan Day about kind of Marcus Freeman's past and his history with Ohio State, but also Al Washington, Ohio State's former linebackers coach, who is now on Notre Dame staff as a defensive line coach. There was obviously some ties there, and Ryan Day could have went the route of just kind of complimenting, Al Washington and talking about his time at Ohio State, but Ryan Day kind of went outside the lines a little bit, and I felt like he went out of his way to compliment Marcus Freeman, called him a tremendous coach, has a lot of respect for him. And the reason that stood out for me, at least, me being covering Notre Dame, is because 11 days ago when we were in Fort Lauderdale before the Orange Bowl, similar theme had arose where, Penn State coach James Franklin was asked to comment about Marcus Freeman in his coaching career. And, Franklin joked about Freeman's hairline and how old Freeman was. And all in the moment, it felt like, pretty elementary, pretty silly. I mean, it got everyone in the room to laugh, but Marcus Freeman didn't take too kindly to it. So that added some extra motivation for the Orange Bowl. That's why part of the reason why Notre Dame's here playing in the national championship. But I primarily cover recruiting for Blue and Gold, but I've been working with doing some team coverage this last month. But yesterday at Ohio State's Media Day, I spoke to about a dozen former Buckeyes who were former Notre Dame recruiting targets, and just asked them about their Notre Dame recruitments, because I know a lot of those guys came close to picking Notre Dame, like Luke Montgomery, the starting guard, and obviously Sonny Styles, with Lorenzo Styles being there, who's a current Buckeye. So all those guys had a lot of complimentary things to say about Notre Dame and the program. They all believe that Notre Dame could reach the championship game. So there's certainly a lot of respect between these two staffs. Marcus Freeman, praised the Ohio State coaching staff as well during his news conference. So, it's all respect now. But once the ball kicks off, I'm sure it'll be a little bit different.
Yeah, it was cool. Freeman made a point the other day talking about, because Marcus Freeman played for Ohio State, right? I mean, everybody who's watching this knows this, and anybody who's going to be watching the game on Monday night's going to know it for sure. But one of his teammates was James Laurinaitis, who is a coach on the Ohio State staff right now. And Freeman made a comment today. He said, hey, friendships and relationships will always be friendships and relationships, right? But we're going to compete on Monday night. And he said every one of those guys on Ohio State side of things is going to compete. They want to beat me just as much as I want to beat them. And then when that clock strikes 000, they're still going to be friends. And I thought that was just really interesting, because a lot of these times, like you said, you guys experienced it down at Penn State. There hasn't been anything on Ohio State's run to this point where, there's been some animosity. But we've certainly seen it in the past with the team up north and all of that stuff with Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh and all those guys. So really interesting perspective to kind of pick up on and see here throughout the week. So Kyle, talking specifically about the game, right? Ohio State's coming into this thing as heavy favorites. Last I checked, 9.5-point favorites.
It's up to 9.5 now.
I saw it at 9.5.
I know it opened 8.5.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you why in a minute why that 8.5 number matters. Yeah. But
so anyway, Ohio State massive favorites into this game. Tell us why that 8.5-point number is important.
Well, Notre Dame is under Marcus Freeman. These last 3 years have been one of the best programs in all college football against the spread, and especially this year, they are the best team in all college football, along with Arizona State against the spread. Notre Dame's, I think, 12-2-1, and if it was an 8.5-point game, that's a one possession game, obviously with 8 points. 9.5. Ohio State would have to win by 2 scores. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure we'll touch on this later, but one of my, game keys or whatever you want to call it is, Notre Dame's going to have to keep things pretty close and kind of drag Ohio State down. I think if they can kind of keep it within one possession, Notre Dame will be right there toward the end. So, yeah, that's why the spread for this game is going to be pretty fascinating considering how successful Notre Dame has been against it. So I know a lot of the Ohio State crew is expecting a big Ohio State win, but I think that at the very least Notre Dame's going to keep this pretty manageable, and it will be a one-score game, I feel like.
Well, if you're into that type of stuff, which I'm very vocal that I am, this is good information it's great information to know. But Kyle, we'll get into the more games or the bigger picture game specifics here. But one of the things I want to really dive into is there's been a lot made of the matchup between the Notre Dame secondary and the Ohio State wide receiver core. I think that it is a strength on strength matchup. I think Notre Dame secondary is probably one of their stronger unit groups. And I think that Ohio State's wide receiving core is not only their strongest group on their team, and that's saying something, but I think it's one of the better groups in all of college football, led by Jeremiah Smith, who got Julio Jones vibes from. And then you got Emeka Egbuka, who's going to be a first-round type player. In your opinion, how do you expect this matchup to go? There's been a lot of talk about Notre Dame not getting away from their country-leading man-to-man coverage. They lead it. They do it more than anybody else in the country. So what are some of the things that you're thinking about when you're looking at that matchup when Ohio State has the football?
Expecting a lot of man coverage. That's what's got them here. Marcus Freeman has talked about that on numerous occasions, even before this week. Like, they're built to be a man coverage team. That's how they call the defense. I don't expect them to go away from that a whole lot, especially because they have the personnel to do it. That's why they run it. Their number one cornerback is Leonard Moore, who is a true freshman All-American. Pro Football Writers, not Pro Football, but Football Writers Association of America named Leonard Moore their Defensive Freshman of the Year. He came in for an injured Benjamin Morrison, who was widely viewed as a first-round pick and a preseason All-American entering 2024. Leonard Moore is arguably, I don't even know how you can say it, but been better than Benjamin Morrison. I mean, any guy that he faces, he pretty much puts clamps on him. And on the other side, they have a very talented cornerback as well, a true sophomore in Christian Gray. And, Gray's been susceptible to giving up big pass plays. USC was successful against him, in having a couple of big gains, but he also, ironically enough, got one back on him, an interception in that big game. And the reason that's relevant is because Notre Dame responds to adversity really well. That's one of the themes of this year and this program under Marcus Freeman. And the other thing in terms of the matchup between Ohio State's offense and, the passing game at least, and the Notre Dame secondary is that when you look the last 2 years, especially last year, Notre Dame was able to take Marvin Harrison away. He only had 3 catches for 32 yards in that 23 matchup. I know there's a lot of comparisons on your side between Jeremiah Smith and Marvin Harrison. Obviously, Smith's a pretty explosive and exciting player. But I think Notre Dame can slow him down. The one thing that I'm going to be interested in to see is how they handle Emeka Egbuka, because I'm pretty sure Egbuka had his best game against Notre Dame last year. In the 2022 version of this matchup, he had a pretty solid game as well. So they've been able to slow down Ohio State's number 1 wide receiver, so to speak, but it's been Egbuka that's beat them in the air. So we'll see how Notre Dame defends him, and that's something I'm going to be watching pretty early on Monday night.
Yeah, and for the viewers of our show, I'm a huge fan of Emeka Egbuka. And the other guy that showed his face last week was Carnell Tate, right? Ohio State fans know him really, really well. If you're a Notre Dame fan jumping into this video here, watch out for 17. Ohio State has 3 guys who would be legit number 1s on pretty much any program in the country. Just so happens that they play all underneath of each other. So if they take number 4 away, here comes number 2. If they try to take both those guys away, 17 is going to be a tough guard as well. So it'll be really interesting from that perspective. Now, another key storyline, in my opinion, Kyle, is the injuries, right? Ohio State's been relatively healthy in most areas. We'll get into the Ohio State injuries on the offensive line, which has been a storyline of this season. But Notre Dame has suffered a couple injuries on their defensive line to some of their key players, as well as some injuries to their offensive line. And a lot of those right now.
Yeah, I'm our injury reporter.
You're the injury guy. This is the injury guy.
That's all I do is report on injuries. And the big one coming into this week specifically is left tackle. And left tackle freshman Anthony Knapp suffered a season-ending ankle injury against Penn State in the Orange Bowl. And in the Orange Bowl, they went to Tosh Baker as the left tackle, which he only had played 60 snaps going into that game. He's been a career backup for Notre Dame. But later on in that game, right guard Rocco Spindler, who's been battling an ankle for the latter part of this year during the playoffs, he went down early in the second half, late in the first half, and they replaced Spindler with Charles Jogusall, who is a sophomore that before the season, he was slated to start at left tackle, and he injured his pec, was ruled out for the year. He wasn't supposed to play this year, but Notre Dame has advanced so far in the postseason. It's given them some runway to heal and to play, and Jogusall replaced Spindler in that game. But now, going into this week, they think Spindler's going to be good enough to go. So they're going to rely on Spindler at right guard. And how about this? They're going to put Jogusall back at left tackle, right where he was supposed to be to start the season. And so the offensive line, that's the most banged up part of Notre Dame's offense. Jeremiah Love's been working through a knee injury. I talked to Dylan McCullough, Notre Dame's running backs coach, last week. He told me McCullough, not verbatim, paraphrasing here, but pretty much looks to what he did at Penn State. McCullough specifically told me that, in terms of Love's capabilities, that he couldn't even address the situation similarly to what he did to me on media day yesterday. That's how much better Jeremiah Love looks. And then at wide receiver, Bo Collins, who is one of their starting wide receivers, he missed most of the Orange Bowl. He'll be back. And then on defense, just touching on that, Notre Dame lost Riley Mills, who was one of their top defensive linemen, a potential NFL draft pick in the first round against Indiana. He's been out since then. Howard Cross, who was an All-American last year, he's been battling an ankle injury that's kind of hampered him. But besides that, secondary's been healthy. Linebackers for the most part as well. So Notre Dame is going to be about as healthy as they can get for this game. And I know a lot of teams are banged up this time of year. Yeah. So, I think a lot of those guys should be ready to go. And it's the last game of the season. Yeah. I know you, as being a guy that played a lot of championship football, you do whatever it takes during these games.
This is the one where you take whatever you got to take. You wrap it up however tight you got to wrap it up, and then you go play. It doesn't matter how you're feeling. But it's funny you say that this is relatively Notre Dame's healthiest group. And we just went through a laundry list of guys who are banged up. And for Ohio State, I think that's really important because obviously the strength of this Ohio State defense, in my opinion, is, well, there's a couple strengths, right? I think the linebackers are fantastic. The secondary has become one of the better groups in the entire country. I think your weak points potentially are at the cornerback spot, but those guys have been great. Your strong point is the safety group. But we've seen the guys who make the game-changing plays is that defensive line. It's Jack Sawyer, it's JT Tuimoloau, it's Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton. And got a cool opportunity to talk to Tyleik yesterday, and just the aura of confidence that he gave off of, hey, if we do our job, we're going to be in good shape. And knowing that Notre Dame's offensive line is beat up, that's something that everybody should keep their eyes on early on in the game, is how can, if Notre Dame is trying to string together drives, what's the Ohio State defensive line doing, and how's the Notre Dame offensive line kind of responding to it. But really good insight there on some of that injury news, because that's a big part of this game. We're in week 16. They were talking about it this morning that there's never been a team that's played 16 games of college football. This is the first year that it's happened. So it's been quite a war of attrition. So, Kyle, as you're looking at this game from the Notre Dame perspective, Notre Dame point of view, talked about how Marcus Freeman's team is this year especially really good at covering that spread. They're keeping games pretty close. In your vision, if Notre Dame is winning the football game when that clock hits triple zeros, how does this game go? What's that storyline look like for the Irish?
Still trying to figure that out, but part of the way I've wrestled with that with Ohio State's offense, my gut is, so Marcus Freeman told reporters after the Georgia game that they felt that they wouldn't lose the game if Georgia was able to pass against them. Mm-hmm. But if Georgia could run the football, that was going to be one of the ways Notre Dame lost that game. And it was similar against Penn State. They didn't allow a catch to a wide receiver. Insane. So I'm trying to figure out how they can slow down Ohio State. And I think I kind of come to that they gotta keep Ohio State from beating them in the air. Last game, Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton from Penn State, they had a lot of yardage against Notre Dame, especially in the first half. I think if you had to make me pick, I think you probably do what you can to take away the pass and try. I know Ohio State's backfield is so talented, but I don't know if Ohio State can beat Notre Dame just running the football, because everyone knows by now that's what they tried to do against Michigan, and the outcome was what the outcome was. So that's what I think defensively Notre Dame has to do, and on offense, the blueprint is pretty simple this time around, and has been the whole season. Run game is their strength. Passing offense is in the bottom third of the FBS. Jeremiah Love is probably at his best health of this postseason since he injured his knee against USC in the final regular season game. But the kind of the X factor that I'm starting to buy into is Riley Leonard and his rushing ability. It's my understanding that Ohio State doesn't really match up too well against running or quarterbacks that can run the football, and Riley Leonard is among the elite. When you look at the statistical categories, some of the guys that are ahead of Riley Leonard in terms of rushing are like Bryson Daly from Army, whose offense revolves around that. But Notre Dame's offense has had to revolve around that at times this year. So I think they got to get Riley Leonard going on the ground and obviously slow down the pass game on the Ohio State pass game. You're going to have to drag Ohio State into the mud, so to speak, and kind of slow them down. And what worries me is if Ohio State gets ahead by 3 possessions, this can be tough for Notre Dame to play catch up.
Yeah, I think for me, on the flip side of that, if Notre Dame, if Ohio State gets out early, I think it's bad news for the Irish, because I don't think that this Notre Dame offense is built to chase, right? It's going to be really hard if they get down a score or two scores early. So I think similarly to how Texas approached the semifinal game, was like basically win the first quarter, and then whatever happens from there happens from there. At least keep it a game for as long as you can. And that goes to your point of kind of dragging them into the mud and trying to muck it up and make Ohio State get uncomfortable, make Will Howard be very precise. He's shown that he can be, but if you make him do it, drive in and drive out, there's going to be lulls in the game where if I think Notre Dame wants to hang into it, I think that they're going to have to do some of those things. So certainly feels like Ohio State's obviously a heavy favorite, but that's never stopped at it before. We are less than 24 hours away from a 9-point favorite beating the Detroit, or the 9-point dog just straight up beating the Detroit Lions. So it certainly can happen, and it'll be a bunch of storylines to watch. So Kyle, as we put a wrap on this and get out of here, tell the people where they can find your work and where they can follow you.
Yeah, I got tremendous staff at Blue and Gold. Tyler Horka, Jack Solon, my colleagues cover the team as well as anyone, and they're doing a lot of great work this week. I'm doing my best to compliment them and fill in the gaps. So we'll have all our stories up on blueandgold.com, and of course we're active on social media. I know my Twitter handle is by Kyle Kelly, but I don't know theirs off the top of my head. But yeah, we're excited to cover this game. It's been a pretty special season with Notre Dame, just kind of putting some perspective on that, because Notre Dame hadn't won a major bowl game, a New Year's Six game, since I think 93. So it's been over 3 decades.
Yeah.
They've won 2 of those this year, and now they're playing for the national championship. So we've really been quite rewarded with the team we've gotten to cover this year. I know with Ohio State, seems like you guys get to cover all these games every single year, but it doesn't happen all the time at Notre Dame. But I think they got the right guy, Marcus Freeman, and I think we got the right staff at Blue and Gold to cover it.
Well, all Kyle's work is linked in the bio below. So just go to the show description. It'll be a link to his website. It'll be a link to his profile page on On3, and then also a link to his Twitter account, his X page, whatever. I'm never going to get that right. But jump down there. And if anything, if you're not following for the Irish, follow him because he's a fellow blue streak of mine. We go way back, and I know somewhere, I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but somewhere Chris Wensler's smiling down on us, our guy there. Wensler Warriors, if you're watching from home in Cleveland, it's always a shout out to there. So Kyle, appreciate you jumping on with me. For all of our Ohio State fans, you know where to find us. If you're watching on Twitter right now, head over to our YouTube page. It is Ohio State Buckeyes on SI. Hit that subscribe button. If you're on YouTube, head over to that Twitter page. Find us on social medias, and then head to our website, si.com/Ohio/college/Ohio State. It's going to roll right underneath me on that ticker. So find it there. We got tons of great content coming for you here as we're just over 24 hours away from the national championship between the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your Sunday. 90.